It is. It's been a while. No fault of Dio's, by the way, if he's less prepped. Dio has been grinding super hard the last 2 days to get all the graphics ready for this episode. So huge shout out to Dio there. But with that said, let's get right into it. Let's talk about some qualifier results. Now, really quickly, I do want to just go over the teams that did not qualify that you guys in the last episode predicted to qualify. We had New Zealand, Denmark, Israel, and Netherlands. And of those, I think most of the teams were kind of bubble teams, anyways, ones that you expected to probably squeak in, but kind of a 50-50. The big one to me was New Zealand qualifying in 44th. Is a pretty disappointing result. They have some decent players on their team, so that was the biggest surprise, but I think the other three less unexpected.
Yeah, I mean Israel as well, getting 43rd, so right next to New Zealand. I mean, yeah, I think both teams had star players that, in theory, can play very very well and definitely have a quals performance in the bag. But likely, quals is a fickle thing sometimes, and maybe they just weren't feeling it on the day, and unfortunately didn't make it happen.
Yeah, I think
Yep.
Israel's the biggest surprise. A lot of their roster was somewhat unchanged from previous years. Whereas for New Zealand and Italy, they both had, in the case of New Zealand, no Zoomer this year. In the case of Italy, like 6 members left, and a lot of those were very, very strong members, like Kirochi, Shadomodiko, Ryuzaki. So it was basically just Arj left out of the core four from last year. And so I don't think it's super surprising that Italy didn't qualify. You want to believe, but it's sometimes tough.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to say, overall, with you guys were really accurate with the tier list this year. Pretty impressive. I think Russia, Indonesia, UK were all 2 tiers off, but otherwise the teams were mostly spot on, and a few were 1 tier off as well. So let's get right into the actual teams that qualified. Now, I was gonna set the kind of seed 17 to 32 teams as one group originally, but it turns out there's kind of the bottom three is pretty interesting actually. It was Belarus, Austria, and Peru from 30 to 32, and those are three teams that I think a lot of people didn't necessarily expect to qualify. I think for Belarus especially, I have to give a big shout out to Temazi Pro, who absolutely popped off and is pretty much the only reason they got in. Played insanely well. Austria was more of a team effort, and of course Peru. Arnold was absurd, as you would expect, 19th individual, but three teams that will be interesting to watch for sure.
I believe Belarus as well. Also, as well as Tempaz Pro you mentioned. They also had Vudek getting 88th overall. Tempaz getting I believe 48th in performance score. So two really high performance scores. Keep in mind that's consisting of all the players in the tournament, and those two performances together with honestly just pretty solid team scores led them from going for I believe they got 40th last iteration all the way to 32 this time. So they kind of did a Kazakhstan. Peru I think is the biggest surprise for me, just because in 2022 there was a similar case where you have like everybody believing Arnold can carry the team, and Arnold got fourth in performance score that year, playing every map, popping off ridiculous performance, and it wasn't enough. They got 37th overall. And this time, Arnold comparatively did worse. Obviously, still did fantastic, but I think the big thing for Peru, the difference maker for them this year compared to 2022, is the fact that the rest of the Peruvian, team
Yeah.
stepped up, obviously, because otherwise, just Arnold wouldn't have been enough.
Yeah, and I think that's largely due to members like Hasaki, Pra, Judani throughout the year becoming much better in tournaments. A lot of those members I think were very solid in qualifiers, and their performances throughout the year in tournaments. I feel like having some backup for Arnold basically is the only
Yeah, yeah.
thing that Peru needed in order to qualify, and they finally have some backup for Arnold. So just makes sense that they make it in this year, I think.
Yeah. I also wanted to talk about Brazil quickly, the 17th seed. A bit of a different team this year. They don't have Listia to rely on. It was actually X and Izzy who really stepped up this time around, which is interesting. But the most interesting result in this kind of 17 to 32 range was, of course, Indonesia. It was one of those few teams that you guys had 2 tiers higher in last week's predictions. And I feel like last year as well, they really underperformed in the group stage, not so much qualifiers. I mean, their best player was Dito with 65th overall individually. Lifeline really struggled. Now, I will say, to be fair to Lifeline, he'd have to play just about every map in the pool, which I think doesn't really play to Lifeline's strength. So as we get into the group stage and they can pick maps that are more geared towards them, they should fare a little bit better because I think they have pretty clearly defined strengths and some pretty clearly defined weaknesses that drag them down in qualifiers as well.
Oh, also, oh yeah, I was gonna say I don't want to skip over.
yeah.
But before we skip over the bottom three, Austria as well. They had
Yeah.
maybe the biggest glow up of all. They went from 43rd to 31st, which is kind of insane. I mean, that is a massive glow up off the back of I think several players like Fedorogus, Z9A. So it's really really insane glow up from them as well.
Yeah, going back to Indonesia, I feel like they're a team that does that a lot, right? If you look at how they've played in 3-digit World Cup, for example, and their OWC team this year is almost exactly the same as their 3-digit World Cup team from last year. It's very, very similar. What usually happens is they have a qualifiers that's a little bit lower than you might expect, and then they do better in bracket stage. In OWC in recent years, it's actually been the opposite a little bit. They've qualified higher than they've actually placed in the bracket stage. But the potential is there for Indonesia to do better, so I'm kind of just looking forward to seeing what they might be able to do in bracket stage this year, whether they can turn around the lack of success in OWC and mirror the success that they've had in 3-digit World Cup.
Yeah.
Taiwan as well, getting 25th from 26th last year with a very, very, very different roster, I think is pretty cool. I think there was a good amount of people who took them off, like the quality predictions compared to last year. Probably just not really having faith in the new roster, but no, they still played pretty well.
Yeah, I know Willie really played well for Taiwan, and it's a good sign, right? Like Taiwan has for so many years been the, uh, sword, shield, riser team, and so it's good to see that they're still able to compete without that core that they've had for so long, and it's great to see new players stepping up for Taiwan. Another team, Turkey, really overperformed compared to a lot of people's expectations, I think, pretty much solely because of Raikoho, who just popped off super hard in qualifiers, was the fifth best player individually, which is absurd considering some of the names in this tournament. And so we'll see how far Raikoho can take them in this tournament. I think, of course, credit to the rest of the team as well. You can't just do it off the back of one player. The rest of Turkey was there to support as well, which got them a relatively good seed this year.
Yeah, I just want to. We talked about this during the showcase, but Raikoho double S Nomad won twice on both of Turkey's runs, which is just like, I mean, what do you do, man? How much harder do you need to carry, right? So this guy is extremely good. Turkey obviously is not just 19th seed because of him. We've seen in the past with Arnold and Peru that if you don't have the other teammates to back you up, then it doesn't really matter how good you are individually. But definitely having that individual standout performer is super helpful. So I'm excited for Turkey this year. Maybe they, with 19th seed, they're expected to win a match at least. So we'll see if they're able to make good on their seeding.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Really, the only other two things I wanted to mention for this range of teams, Kamenchik showing a really good performance for Kazakhstan, and of course Lesbury, very much as expected, putting up a really good showing for Thailand. Anything else you guys had to say about this kind of range of teams before I move on?
I think that's all from me. I think the rest of the slots were
I thought
relatively
so.
expected.
Yeah. So seeds 9 to 16. This one was honestly pretty straightforward. It was almost exactly as expected based on qualifiers. Now, there were a couple notable exceptions. That being UK, who a lot of people expect it to be much stronger, but I think all of them except for one player were playing in LAN, so not on their usual setups. Despite that, Bubbleman was the 20th individual performer. Really impressive performance considering he wasn't on his normal setup. And no Qualifier either. That is a big player to have missing, especially for some of those DT, some of those tapping maps. And so it's almost like a Canada Light from last year, where they underqualify and have a chance to mess up the bracket a little bit if they end up facing off against Australia in quarterfinals. That would be the big kind of clash. So we'll see how that ends up playing out, but it could make for some excitement, as we saw with Canada-US in the quarterfinals last year.
Yeah, I do think missing a Qualifier probably hurts on the DT1, DT2 especially. They were number 28 and number 32 overall out of all runs from both teams on those. So it definitely could have had maybe a better performance with a Qualifier on those, but mainly, 6 of the 7 players who were there being on LAN setups, not at home, is definitely not ideal for any team trying to play qualifiers. We saw something similar happen with Canada last year, being at TwitchCon with 2 of their best players, and that brought them from wherever they would have placed down to 11th. They ended up getting top 6, which is where they ended up placing this year, but. Yeah, it's kind of a similar story for the UK this year. A lot of people expecting this team to be really good. I do want to call attention to Philippines up at number 9. A lot of people, especially I've seen mostly on social media, not necessarily so much like people, other OWC commentators or people, tournament players who are really familiar with the roster. But a lot of people on social media I've seen calling the Philippines team really weak this year. I think I had them 13-16 in my tier list overall. They were 9th in qualifiers. This is still a team that is very solid. Same for the Polish roster. They come in at number 11. So another team that I think a lot of people were expecting to be a little bit worse than where they placed in qualifiers. So both of those teams still holding together really well despite losing some key players from last year.
Yeah, I think a big respect to both teams because I think it's a big mental tax to lose. I think in Poland, Poland's case, they lost Malice, they lost Nahus, and in Philippines, obviously, it was Hyok and Henry. But to still be like, despite that, we're gonna try our best. We're gonna, make the best of what we have. We're not gonna get tilted and demotivated. I think Philippines getting 9th overall is an awesome performance. From 5th to 9th, losing 2 huge players is incredible, and especially with Nathan Ram. I did not expect Nathan Ram to get 3rd on performance score playing every map. That was not on my bingo card. That's an unreal performance from Nathan Ram. So huge shout out. But obviously having the team to back him up as well. And just gotta give a shout out for that team to not getting demotivated despite the loss. And they're showing that they're not good because of those players. They're good because they're just a good region. It's awesome to see. And same for Poland.
Exactly. And it does feel like a big loss, right? And it is easy to get demoralized, especially as a viewer and as a player as well. But ultimately, every player on both of these teams is still incredibly strong, good enough, even without those big names, to get top 16. And for Philippines especially, I mean, you add Hyok and Enri to this roster, especially if Nathan Ram can keep up this level of performance for the rest of the tournament. And this is a roster that's competing for top 4, top 6 easily. And so even though not having Enri and Hyok hurts, they still have insanely good players that can put up some very strong tournament results regardless. And it's nice to see some of those players that kind of took a bit more of a backseat last year, really stepping up for Philippines this year and keeping them in the spotlight. The one other team I wanted to call it is Romania in 16th. No Badu this year certainly hurt, but they still have most of their core. So they've always been a pretty consistent team, especially in the bracket outside of qualifiers. They tend to look pretty good. And so they're a team that I look to potentially outperform their seed if they can get some favorable matchups.
Yeah.
Anything else on? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to also sorry, I was busy fixing some stream stuff, so I don't know if you talked about Norway, but Norway seed 12 this year, Brazil seed 17. I feel like there's a reason both of those teams went up and down, and the reason is Zubs being on Team Norway this year.
Yeah.
Norway generally has gotten better, right? But they also added one of the best players from Brazil last year to their roster. He lives in Norway right now. So Flag changed to Norway and registered with their team this year. And generally Norway has gotten better, but definitely having Zubs is a big help for them. Generally performed best on some of the hard rocks, especially Hard Rock 2, but wasn't nearly the top performer for Norway. So while he was a factor, a lot of the other players from Norway were doing really, really well this year. Yokspai, of course, came back and did very, very well on his specific maps, and then Neneric played 20 of 22 maps and averaged 630k. So still a very, very solid country, and looking forward to seeing what Norway can do with a much better seeding than they've had in the past. We've said, hey, Norway's roster looks good this year, the last couple of years in a row. Well, they were qualifying in like 19th or so in previous years. They're 12th this year. So big boost to the seeding.
I think last year Zubs was consistently one of the strongest performers for Brazil, along with the Fawns. And as you said, a bit of a rough qualifier, but potentially a bit of a trend, maybe a spoiler, but we saw a similar thing with Hyok. This obviously very, very strong player, changing flags this year and having a bit of a rough qualifiers. But I think based on previous performances, we can expect players like Hyok, like Zubs, to bounce back for their teams and put up strong showings. But I think that's really it for that range. Now, seeds 4 to 8, they're always interesting. Even though we have tend to have the same teams in 4 to 8 almost every year, there's some variance. It is kind of as expected, but what's always interesting about seeds 4 to 8 is not the teams themselves, but the order, right? I feel like so many years, it feels like there's a clear top 2 this year, a clear top 3, and then you've got teams 3 to 8 or teams 4 to 9 even, all being very competitive, very close in skill. It's always exciting to see which teams come out on top. And in seed number 8, it was HK, MCY4, and Suwagi, both back this year. I know they had a year with no Suwagi, they had a year with no MCY4. And with the both of them back in this year, I think they could put up a pretty strong performance, and that's going to be a big boost to their roster.
Yeah, and you try to as a commentator, as somebody who talks about teams, you try to play up the other members as well. But MCY4 and Suwagi really are the dynamic duo for Hong Kong. They were the number 18 and number 29 overall performers in qualifiers. MCY4 played 21 of 22 maps. Suwagi played 17 of 22 maps, and they were still averaging 650k plus despite that. So these two really are the backbone of this team. You do have a couple of other players as well up in the top 50 performers, though. Max Birio and Misha Awa. Max Birio, not too surprising, played all 22 maps, but Misha Awa is a relatively new face as far as I know. I've seen them in a couple tournaments throughout the year. Only played 10 maps in qualifiers, but averaged a solid 750k. Mostly plays aim control, gimmick kind of stuff for Hong Kong. So I think expect to see Misha Awa on a lot of winning points this year for Hong Kong as seed number 8.
Yeah, I think Misha was the big surprise for me because when I was looking at, doing my pick'ems and getting through the top 8, Hong Kong was 9th on my list. Like if I was going to remove anybody, I would have put Hong Kong in, but I couldn't bear to remove anybody else. Mostly because obviously Hong Kong got Suwagi back, which is massive for them. But they also lost, I think they changed 4 players, including Suwagi. So they also changed a few others. And there was some, pretty good, solid performers that they swapped out. And I was a bit unsure of the new players, but I think Misha Awa, new player for the Hong Kong roster this year who really showed up. And I think had it not been for the combined effort of the entire team, I don't think they would have gotten top 8. It can't just be on the back of MCY4 Suwagi. But yeah, some of the new players as well showing up and showing what the country's capable of.
Yeah. Chile ended up seed number 7, of course, with Matthew and Interhambing. But believe it or not, It was Suntan, the team captain, who really stepped up this time around. I think was a ninth overall individual. Intercambing was number 11. They had the best score on the DT2, so a very scary speed roster. But this Chile team, to me, feels like a pretty deep roster, actually. You obviously have your kind of core players in Matthew, Intercambing, and potentially a Suntan if you can keep up the performance. But number 37, Gonza, Chalk Gamer have all shown really good performances very consistently in 3-digit and 4-digit tournaments, even open rank. I know number 37. I think it was earlier this year, maybe it was last year, won the hidden tournament, and so they have a lot of potential this year, and especially in the early rounds, they're going to be a very scary team, especially looking towards those mechanics maps.
Yeah, I mean, Chile this year, like in their tryouts, Suntan was also the top scorer in their tryouts, above both Mathy and Intercambing across 2 separate map pools. So if you include Qualifiers performance scores as a part of that, that's now 3 map pools in a row for OWC, whether it's tryouts or Qualifiers, where he is the top performer on the team. So to me, there's not much of a question of whether he can keep up the performance. He's already been doing that through 3 separate rounds of play, effectively. The question is like, how well can they carry the seeding, to me, because round of 16 you expect it to be close, right? They are seed number 7 versus seed 10, so that's Chile versus United Kingdom in round of 16. So that is going to be a very tough match,
Yeah.
right? That's not an easy bracket despite the high seed for Chile. And then even if you make it through that, the next team that you would face is Australia, who is seed number 2. So it's
Yeah,
not like
it's
you have
tough.
an easy bracket. You're probably in loser's bracket at best by top 12 semifinals weekend, unless you pull off the same kind of upset that Australia did against Poland last year in quarterfinals. So it's still a tough bracket regardless for Chile, but they've had a solid performance. One other thing to talk about is Chile is the start of teams with over 3 million average score throughout qualifiers. There's a over 200,000 average score gap between Chile and Hong Kong. So while top 8 is usually talked about for bracket purposes, the real distinction here is top 7, 3 million plus average score, and an over 200,000 average score difference between the two.
For sure.
Yeah, there's a bit of a jump there from 8 to 7, and I think one really cool thing about the progression of Chile as a team, because Chile now like feels, like there's like a sort of top 8 club of like countries you just expect to get top 8. The club is like Germany, Canada, Russia. And then you have like top 3 now with South Korea, Australia, USA. Chile is like now in that top 8 club, which is awesome to see because in 2022 they didn't have intercamping Mathy that year, and it really showed
The
in their
famous
quality performance.
crash out.
They got 29th overall, but like
Yeah.
most of the players from that 29th overall roster are in this roster, but they just got way better. Suntan obviously the biggest outlier in performance, but just the entire team has gotten insane now, and now it went from being kind of a Matthew and a camping carry show to now it's just Chile as a region is unbelievable. So really cool to see that progression.
All
Yeah.
right,
And
let's maybe move on a little bit because we're taking up a little much time on the qualifiers for now. So let's go on to
yeah.
Canada. I'll just start us off real quick. Canada, they're top 6 every year since 2018. You just expect them to be top 6. Even when they switch out players, kind of similar to the United States, you're going to expect the team to still just be good because most of the players in Canada that even have a chance at making the World Cup team are pretty good. The roster swaps this year, I think, spec them a little bit away from speed and a little bit more into aim and mechanics. And they still do have their carry players with people like Zuninator especially just popping off in qualifiers. But they are still a scary speed team. They're 14th overall on the DT2, but 5th on DT1, which was very solid, 3.4 million. And then 9th on DT3. But still very solid scores on Hidden, good scores on Hard Rock, and pretty solid scores across the Nomad pool. Outside of the Nomad 3, they kind of flopped a little bit on that one, but aside from that and the DT2, I mean, the worst placement they had was 11th on the Hard Rock one, so generally a solid team across most mods, but I do think the later the tournament goes, the more they're going to have to lean away from that speed again.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I could say about Canada, but in the interest of time, I'll keep it quick. It's the same core three as every year, right? All that's changed is the kind of roster around those core three. And so you're going to see a lot of the same things. And I feel like it's the same story with Canada most years. They're one of the strongest teams in the early rounds. They hit the finals pool and they hit a bit of a brick wall and end up finishing somewhere in the top six. And I don't imagine it's going to be any different this year. Germany, strong seed number 5. Kriller, 4th individual. Whitecat, a 10th individual. Really good to see Whitecat back on form. I think if Germany wants a chance at top 3, top 4, then we really need to see Whitecat performing at similar levels to a couple of years ago. And we need to see Kriller at his best as well. But Kriller has been absurd lately, so should give Germany a bit of a boost. I do feel like they have pretty clearly defined strengths and weaknesses this year as well, but not in a bad way like you might see with some of the lower seeded teams. They have they're going to be really strong on a lot of the tech picks, especially really strong aim mechanics, and so that should give them a lot of options to pick with most pools.
Yeah, I mean, Germany is, again, a team that has been top 6 since I think like 2014 or something. They've been in the top echelon of teams for a really long time. They were formerly competing for first with the United States in the early 2020s, and now are still a contender for a top 3. But I think in a lot of people's minds, the top 3 is already pretty decided. So for most people, contender for top 6, top 4 is more the place where people have Germany this year. So they're looking to prove people wrong. This qualifiers was good for them, but not good enough. So it's again a question of how far they can take their seeding, because once you get to quarterfinals, you have a tough matchup once again versus Russia. And Vorty, why don't you talk about them?
Oh yeah, I mean Russia, doing I think about what they expected from last year, getting 4th between both years. Also another step up in qual results. Going from Germany to Russia is a step up of about just under 100K. But I mean, yeah, this country has just unreal depth. They have so many fantastic players. Getting number 1 overall on NoMod 2, getting I think they had the second highest DT pool overall, getting third, and second on DT1, DT2, DT3 respectively. Russia has always had, I think, a really good speed comp, but this speed comp is probably their best ever. Really, really good mechanics. They have a weakness in hidden, like a pretty big one. I think of these top seeding teams, I want to say in the top 5, Russia's hidden pool might be the weakest of anybody's pool. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because I think sometimes it's better to just have really, really notable strengths where you can just win picks and then you just ban hidden, you don't pick it, and if they win it, they win it. But really, really good on NoMod performance as well. Other than NoMod 1, which is a bit interesting, considering it's
there.
I don't know. You just have to presume they got a bit unlucky because they got, 3rd on NoMod 3, 5th on NoMod 4, first on NoMod 2, as I mentioned before. So, I mean, I think Russia to me, I think if the pools are good for them, I think they have a top 3 potential performance. Just because I do think they can just ignore the hidden pool and ban it, and their strengths are really good outside of that.
Yeah. One other thing, by the way, the rules changed this year. In previous years, you could not double ban mods outside of NoMod, so you were not able to ban hidden twice. Now you can just double ban hidden as Russia. So you are allowed to use both bans on the 3 hidden pools on hidden. So Russia is in an even better spot despite that hidden weakness this year, because they will only ever have to leave up 1 hidden map no matter what the matchup is.
Yeah, although in the same sense, a lot of teams will probably just double ban the GT against Russia, so it might even out. But I think Vorty covered most of it. It's like he was reading my prep notes, said everything I wanted to say about them. So we can move on to the top 3, and it really was very clear groupings this year. Like Dio kind of mentioned earlier, seeds 4 to 8 had a difference of something like 0.3 max score between them, and it was 0.6 between 8 and 9. Seeds 1 to 3 had about 0.5% max difference between them, but the gap between 3 and 4, the US and Russia, is 0.9. So it really does feel like those top 3 are clear ahead of the rest of the field this year.
And just to put that in terms of average score, right? The
Yeah.
difference between Russia and Chile is less than 100,000 average score. That's 4 seeds of difference. The difference between US and Russia is almost 300,000. So in terms of average score across all 11 maps and qualifiers. So it's a huge difference. And I think people are talking about South Korea, Australia, and United States as pretty much guaranteed top 3 for good reason, because they are just stronger. They collectively hold 9 out of the 11 top scores throughout all of the qualifiers, with 4 of those going to South Korea, 3 to Australia, and 1 to the United States. And if you count just top 3s, it's something pretty similar. I mean, there's quite a few between Russia, Germany, and Canada, and 1 top 1 for Chile as well on the DT2. But outside of that, there's only 2 other top 3s across the entire qualifiers, 1 from China and 1 from UK. So there's a good reason why people are just talking about these 3 teams as basically guaranteed top 3. I don't think we need to talk too much about these teams. We're going to be ending up talking about them quite a lot in future weeks, and
we are.
We've already been at it for 30 minutes. So let's just get some quick strengths and weaknesses for these teams and move on. United States, obviously defending world champions, 6-time contenders once again, just solid on everything. There's not anything in particular that they're bad at. If you had to point out a weakness, it might be just based off the qualifiers pool speed, but that doesn't really hold up going into the later rounds because of how their scaling works. So there isn't really a clear weakness for this team, and it feels like kind of the all-rounder team, whereas Australia and South Korea feel a little bit more specialized this year.
Yeah. Vordy, you have anything quick?
Yeah, I mean, Australia, obviously, as Dia mentioned, specialized the most in the double time, getting first on DT1 and 3, second on DT2. Just, really good DT team. But I think none of the teams in the top 3 have any notable weaknesses. They only have comparative weaknesses to other players in the top 3, maybe. South Korea is weak on DT against Australia and maybe late stage USA, but compared to the other teams in the tournament, they're still good on everything.
Yeah. As a wrap-up, I will say US dropping a 3 seed makes things very interesting as they're set up for a potential quarterfinals rematch with Canada, but 3 seed doesn't mean much. They have 5 players in the top 30 individual. The next best team had 3, and every other team had something like 2. And then, of course, South Korea just looks like the strongest team this year. They have so much depth, so much high skill cap, and they're a terrifying one. But with that said, go ahead,
one last thing to mention. South Korea on hidden is maybe the biggest gap of anything in this entire tournament. Genuinely, South Korea on hidden might be the I don't know. It's ridiculous. I think they it was mentioned in the qualifier results. They got number 1 both times on both of their players. I genuinely don't know if they can reasonably ever lose hiddens. It's just unreal.
Yeah. They're going to be gapping some teams on name control, but why don't we move on to the predictions? I think that is enough about the qualifiers. And for predictions, we're going to be joined by Shiv and Dada. How are the 2 of you doing today?
Hello. Hey everyone.
What's up, guys?
I'm chilling. I've been decently excited for this, but there's also Worlds Finals today, so I'm really excited for that as well. You guys are into League of Legends.
League of Legends, mate.
League of Legends.
This guy.
Dada, things going well? You have some hot takes for us?
Yep.
That's what I like to hear. So for predictions, obviously there are a ton of matches in round of 32. We don't have the time to predict them all. So we are going to skip the matches with seeds 1 to 6, just to save some time, because I think those are all going to be fairly one-sided. None of us would predict against any of the top 6 teams. And so we'll just go in reverse order of the match ID. Let's get started with Poland versus Ukraine, seeds 11 versus 22. I'm going to start us off this time around. And these teams have, I feel like, overlapping weaknesses in the Hard Rock. So while normally that's something you'd like to take advantage of against Poland. I think Ukraine is probably not the team to do that. Ukraine do have good early round players, but missing Dench really hurts. They don't have that same kind of pop-off carry player. And so I do think they're going to take a couple points on the hiddens, but I'd say 5-2 for Poland. Dio?
Okay, so you have 5-2 Poland. I am also the one doing the flag changes
You are.
here, so
All
I
right.
have to.
We'll let Vorty go next then.
Yeah, well, I can
Oh,
I can
yeah,
go now. I can go now.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
You.
I think pretty similarly, right? Like Ukraine, I think did have a bit of a drop off in terms of roster strength this year. Notably, no Dench is tough for them. And again, there are some weaknesses that this Polish roster has. Like you said, notably on a little bit on the hidden pool, a little bit on the hard rock pool.
Yeah.
So you can somewhat take advantage on those. But just comparing with Ukraine, the Ukrainian roster just does not have a big advantage on paper on either of those, especially on hard rock. They did do far worse on the hard rock pool than Poland. Their hard rock 2 was close, but the hard rock 1 was way lower. Similarly in the hidden pool, the hidden 1 was close, still worse, and then their hidden 2 was way lower. So it is tough for Ukraine, I think, to find a win in this match. It is still maybe doable if they can pop off on some of the no mods and maybe some of the hiddens as well, with a lot of the newer Polish players speccing a little bit away from the hidden. I think that starts to become an option for them, but generally speaking, I'm going to prefer Poland on this almost every time. So I am also going to predict Poland for myself.
Vorty.
Oh yeah, I mean this one hurts for me because I really wanted to believe in the Ukraine magic. Obviously, they had the insane upset against Indonesia last year in the round of 32, winning 5-0. I think even without Dench, this roster is still like a lot better on round of 32. I think they benefit more than Poland by far from an easier pool, but I still think the pool is hard enough, and I think Poland is not going to make the same mistake as Indonesia. They're going to respect Ukraine early stage, and I just think overall they are just better on almost everything. So I'm also going to go something like 5-2 Poland. However, saying that, if Ukraine wins this, I will not be shocked. They have a magic about them at early stage.
They really do. Shiv, you have another 5-2 prediction for us, or are you going to change it up?
I have 5-3 for Poland.
We'll take
I'm
it.
really like I'm in a big favor of this Ukraine roster, especially on early stage. I agree that without Dench, they actually have they actually opted for a stronger early team. So this team actually even has a higher chance to really win these early points in the 6.6 star pool. But it's the same with Poland. Like a lot of these newer players are super good on early stage. Like Kosiarek and Agent 5D. Like if you watch them play 4WC, like these guys pretty much didn't miss. So it's really hard because both rosters are super strong, but I also have Poland.
Well, I guess that makes me the
Well.
only one to go the other way, doesn't it?
There had to be one.
There's a couple of things that make me want to go Ukraine. First of all, it's the first OWC for a lot of these Polish guys, and you guys really underestimate OWC nerves.
That's
like
true.
OWC nerves are something that affect you in ways that you can't describe because it's just unlike any other tournament. So like for a lot of these people who are experiencing it the first time, meanwhile like Ukraine, they've been here before, they've even upset people with those OWC nerves. Like that's one such like intangible that I'm favoring towards Ukraine. The second one is qualifiers results. They swing at like a quarterfinals difficulty level. This is round of 32. Like the hard rock pool is completely different. The weaknesses are going to be slightly different. So like anything you see starting in the qualifier pool only really starts mattering in like maybe the hardest round of 16 maps. Like it hasn't kicked in yet. So like this Ukraine roster is really solid, especially in the early stage. And this Polish roster, I think they have a lot to prove. I think they can win this, obviously, like all of you are saying, but I think that for a lot of these Polish people, they will have to like prove it first before I kind of favor them in any way. So I'm gonna go 5-3 Ukraine.
I like the prediction.
I respect it.
And
It's good. It's good. It's
we'll
valid.
we'll send it right back to you, Dada. France versus Turkey. That should be a very interesting one.
Give me a second here. Hold up. Give me just a minute here.
You take your time.
There we are. France versus
we
Turkey.
go.
All right, Dada. What's
Do
good?
you want me to start?
You're up.
I have on my notes here, which I made a couple hours ago. I have 5-3 to France.
Okay.
I think that for a lot of Turkey's strengths in how they were seeded, it relied on a solo carry, and I don't think in a round of 32 poll you can solo carry. Like, Raikoho really put the team on his back. I'm not saying everyone else is bad, obviously, but like they had to hold their own weight to qualify, but Raikoho really affected the seeding.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, in France, it was a little bit more even. I don't think any of them are in their best shape. Like, Koro's not exactly the best he's ever been. Justman is not exactly the best he's ever been. Musty, the old man, still, like, he's had a couple of peaks, a couple of valleys, but I think just overall they have more depth, they have more skill sets that they're strong at, and I don't think Raikoho can really put the team on his back in this early of a stage. So 5-3 Poland. 5-3 Poland. 5-3 France.
Hey, Poland's good enough to beat two teams at once. Shiv, what have you got?
I have 5-3 in favor of Turkey. The reasoning why is because I have a lot of faith in these other players on Turkey on early stage. If you pay attention to a lot of community tournaments, you see players like Shinkiro, Orke, Clutch X. These guys have been tearing it up. Super consistent lower SR players. And I feel like a lot of these France players, this is going to be, it's really like a de-resting like experience for them. You don't see really a lot of these names play tournaments besides FIE now and Mize JD. Players like Musty, who only really played the French tournament. Players like Justman, Kalani, I haven't seen in a long time. Although these players' name value is really high, I think a lot of these Turkey players are really in their prime, and I'm willing to go the extra length to say they have a chance.
Yeah, Bordy?
I'm going France. I'm gonna put them like 5-2. I think the reasoning is a lot of what Dada said. I think as he said before, France just has better depth. I think at a round of 32 stage, like pretty much their entire roster is going to be pretty comfortable. I think they have some very defined strengths in things like Hidden and Hard Rock up against Turkey. I also think Raikoho being incredible, like, even if Raikoho FCs every map, which he might considering his quality performance, at this early stage, it's not enough to have one player popping off. You obviously do need the entire team, and I do think the depth of France's roster is gonna come out ahead of here. Obviously, I might be surprised by some of the players Shiv mentioned, but yeah, I'm France 5-2.
Dio?
Why am I going now? All right. Well, that's fine. I can go. I'm going to say I'm going to go with Kevin here, and I'm going to go with Turkey. The main reason is just I just got faith. I just have a feeling, and sometimes that's all that you actually need. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say I think this is the year for Turkey to pop off. They do have a very, very good speed roster this year. They're better on every single DT map than France. That said, France has the advantage on the Nomads, on the Hiddens, on the Hard Rocks, but there are other places where Turkey did have the advantage in qualifiers, like the Nomad 3 and 4. So taking that together with the just complete on-paper speed advantage they have, I don't think it's just Raikoho that is the deciding factor here. But again, Raikoho is somebody who's going to FC every map, and if you have faith as a member of Team Turkey that, hey, there's somebody on our team who's just good enough that he's going to FC literally everything we pick, and we can just pick what we're best at, and he'll still FC, that can help to take away a lot of the OWC nerves for these guys. So I think there's some tangibles and some intangibles working in favor of Turkey here. And I think in a close seeding matchup like this, that can be enough. Now, I think you can make a similar argument for France, right? They have advantage on Hidden, they have advantage on Hard Rock, they have advantage on some of the Nomads as well. So I think there's definitely room to argue both sides on this. And France does have a little bit more depth, right? There's a big drop off in depth from Raikaho to the rest of the Turkish roster, even though they're all still good players. Raikaho clearly is the carry and the main player for this team, whereas France, yeah, they have some good players, but there's no like mega standout, pop off carry player like Raikaho on Turkey, right? So that can help in early stages, but I just got a feeling, and I think this is a close matchup that could go either way. So I'm going to go with Turkey takes it to tiebreaker, and because Raikaho FC's tiebreaker, they win 5-4.
That's pretty. I'm changing it to 5-4. I think that's valid. Actually, he's FC tiebreaker. He's actually FC tiebreaker. It's true.
It looks like I get to break the tiebreaker. I did think this one would be an incredibly close one. I had it going to tiebreaker as well, and as it turns out, I'm going to be copying Dio and Shiv's predictions. 5-4 for Turkey, for a lot of similar reasons. I'm not going to rehash them again. Raikaho is Raikaho, but I do feel like Vordy and Dada. Yes, the support is slightly weaker for Turkey, but these players are good enough that they can put up good performances on the early round pools, especially like Clutch, Shinkiro, Liar are all very solid players, and I don't think they're going to struggle on a round of 32 pool. And on top of that, I feel like every year France has a stronger team on paper, and they just lose every time. They've got the cat in them. And so I can't, in good faith, predict a France win. They lost 5-2 in round of 32 to Brazil last year when they were seed 11 or 12 or something. And so I'm gonna have to give it to Turkey in tiebreaker. But with that, I think we all agree it's going to be a relatively close one.
It's going to be a good match.
Either way,
it will be. Really
good. This one. Pretty big seed difference, but potentially could make for an interesting match. United Kingdom up against Finland, and
I'll start on this one.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was just going to say quickly, UK might have a player missing. I won't say which one because I don't know if that's public knowledge, but could make it an interesting match. Go for it, Dio.
Yeah, I'm gonna go UK on this one. Yes, there are players that I know on Finland, and they are very good tournament players. There's a lot of returning solid players here for Finland. This is a very similar roster to previous years. I think the bottom three are new: AJJ, Mairi, and Tabletti. But UK this year looks really, really good. I think UK team is underseeded out of qualifiers, largely because of, playing from LAN and also missing a Colibed. So I think they are underseeded out of qualifiers, and that just makes this matchup even more difficult for Finland. To add to that, there's a lot of returning OWC players for UK, so it's not like they have any massive nerves or anything. The big thing for UK is that I think they get to put in 3 experienced, really solid members alongside Skiwawa for every map in round of 32 to help him get used to playing OWC, and that's going to be very, very helpful for them later on in the tournament. And I think they have the wiggle room to do that in some of these early stage matchups. Unfortunately for Finland, that just puts them on the losing end of it, but I do think there are holes that Finland can poke in this roster, right? This is not like an unassailable giant, but it is going to be tough. Finland traditionally a very, very, very strong free mod team, so I would expect them to take at least a point on one of the free mods, but I do think this is going to be pretty well favored toward UK, so I'm going to go 5-2 UK.
Yeah. I'll keep it quick. I might as well go next. I had this one as a pretty one-sided 5-0 for UK, for a lot of the reasons that Dio already mentioned. The only reason I don't give them any points as opposed to Dio is I think Finland has shown that their strongest skill set is those DT picks, something we know that the UK is incredibly strong on, especially once they get a Colibed back, who is, the best tapping player in the world right now. Bubbleman, Malteser, even Haunt and Rudge can play those tapping maps. And so I think it's going to be very difficult for Finland to get a point. I could see them getting 1, but I think that's about it. Vordy?
Yeah, I think I'd go 5-1 to UK. Finland might win on a free mod, as mentioned. Unfortunately, I think their best strength here in qual is by far, which was the DT pool. Really unlucky matchup to get UK, which is a very underseeded team. They got obviously UK got 19th on DT2, but that's just Noah Colley bed playing at LAN. Like their real DT2 score would have been way higher, and they still got third on DT3. So you have to expect UK to play better. And even if they play the same level as they did before, they should still win. So yeah, I think it's gonna be pretty one-sided. But I think Finland is good enough at early stage that they can at least squeak in a point with their roster.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut it short. I think it's 5-1 UK as well. As much as I love this Finland roster, and I think a lot of these guys are super good, like Amacetic and Zeppi and Descu, all really good players. Like this is the strongest UK roster, like in terms of like early game I've seen in a while. Like Skiadzo adds so much, the same with Listia, that I just don't know how Finland can break this wall in a 6-star pool.
Yeah. I had 5-1 UK once I got the knowledge that they were gonna have some players missing, player or players. Then I'm gonna say 5-2 UK. I think Finland can get some points, but I think it's pretty one-sided.
Yep. Next matchup, one that may also be fairly one-sided, but you never know. It's going to be Chile versus Spain, and we can start with Shiv this time around.
I actually think this match is very close, but maybe
Oh,
I'm
okay.
completely wrong. I think it's 5-3 in Chile, but I think this Spanish roster is extremely strong. On early stage, you have like historically extremely strong players like Antonio, and you have Creator who didn't even play qualifiers and they still got 26 because he got grounded. You have Aleph, you have Manolo, you have Escupio. I don't know how to pronounce the name. For your
Escrupulio.
reference, Chile, with half of this OWC roster, got 2-5 by Spain in 4WC round of 32, which was around the same SR. And I have a lot of faith that Spain can easily get some points. Unfortunately, I think with Suntan, with Matthew and Intercambing, and players like Nakoi, I don't think they can really win, but I think 5-3 is pretty generous. I'm willing to give it to them.
Fair enough. Wardy, you want to go next?
I mean, yeah, I respect the faith for Spain for 5-3, but I don't see. To me, this feels like a 5-0. I feel like especially early stage, I think Chile just has no holes. Like I think they can cover pretty much anything. And yeah, I mean, you brought up the 4WC thing, but yeah, having Suntan, Matthew, and Cambing on top of the roster before definitely would help. So yeah, I don't know. I think this is pretty one-sided. I maybe Spain gets a point, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dada.
Okay. I think my notes have 5-2. I think that's pretty generous for Chile versus Spain. I think that Spain has a good roster. I think that they have pretty good players in all of the full width spaces, like Manolo, Antonio, Aleph, Creator, obviously, like pretty high skill cap player. But Chile just has like less holes. They have better players. They've been here before. I know that they've choked a couple times, but like this roster is just so well rounded that I don't think it's that like
Yeah.
possible for Spain to even do anything. Like they're good. They can even get a couple more points if they have a good day and Chile has a bad one, but I don't think this will be as close as Chip suggests.
Yeah, maybe I'm underestimating the Spanish roster, but I think it's going to be a 5-0 for Chile, especially with Suntan being on such good form so far, outperforming Intercambing even. I think just Chile is in too good of a spot right now. I mean, yes, we have seen them choke before, but it has not been in a round of 32, unless I'm misremembering. It's been more so in some of the slightly later stages where they've been favored, but even the supporting players, number 37, Chalk, Gonza, the other two are all very good players that I don't think are going to have any trouble in an early pool like this. And Spain just really lack that kind of star player to put up those big scores and put up the carry performances.
All right, hear me out.
All right.
Suntan, Matthew, Intercambing are not available. They're all grounded this week. And the roster for every map has to be Nakore, Alphiu, who are the two new members, and then any two of Gonza number 37 Chalk Gamer. If that's the case, I think maybe Spain can win. But yeah, Spain's a very good they're a good early stage team. But Chile, even their supporting players, came up through the trenches. Like Suntan, Gonza, number 37, Chalk Gamer, they're all like either 5-digit World Cup or 4-digit World Cup players. They've been around rank restricted tournaments for a very long time. They live and breathe the early stage pools they have for years. So like I just don't think that Spain is winning this match. I do still have Spain winning a match this year, just not this one.
There you go. Dio looked at 14 million futures, and Spain only won in one of them. And unfortunately, that's not this timeline. Our next matchup.
Look out for No 37, by the way. That guy, if he plays on hidden and free mods, like he's gonna get like average score in the top 5 this week. Like that guy is crazy, man.
Yeah. Number 37 is a crazy hidden player at some of the mechanics aim picks, especially. Next up, I think we have a bit of a closer match. Seeds 15 and 18. It's going to be Sweden up against Indonesia. Some very notable players on both teams, of course, Skilla and Lifeline at the top, but both teams with good supporting combos. Vordy, I'll let you start this time.
This is a tough one. This is, I think, one of the hardest picks. 15 versus 18, obviously close in seed. Indonesia feels underseeded here as well. Obviously, they're technically the underdogs, but on paper they should have done better in quals. I thought about it. I have to give it to Sweden because I feel like, especially after last year, Indonesia. What did they qual? What did they qual last year when they lost to Ukraine? They qualified 9th, and they lost to Ukraine at 24 on 0-5. I feel like, based on that and the fact that, I don't know, maybe I just don't think this team is in it mentally as much as they could be. Because on paper, their level of mechanics and skill should have them winning this in theory, but I don't know. They might just be chilling. And I think Sweden, on the other hand, to me is a team that is going to take things a lot more seriously. I feel like they had a couple underperformances in quals, notably like Andros not playing as well on some of the DT picks. And assuming Andros can, de-rust the tapping a little bit in between qualies and now, their DT should go even higher, and that should give them a really big strength there. But overall, I think Skilla as well is incredible. Skilla is, I think, at this stage, should be able to play pretty much everything at a high level. And I think a lot of their players that are maybe a bit more early stage focused will not fall off at this point, and I think their depth is going to be great enough. So I'm going to give it Sweden. I'll be conservative. I'll go like 5-3. But I feel like there's some curse about early stage Indonesia that's gonna work against them here.
There might be. I, believe it or not, have the exact same prediction, and for a lot of the same reasons. I think Sweden is such a consistent team in the early rounds. They have a lot of players that are very strong early, especially, and so I think it's going to be 5-3 Sweden, and I do think Sweden should have the edge on the Hard Rocks and the DTs, which should let them win it. I think there's not necessarily clear advantage for either team. Maybe, in my mind at least, Indonesia is slightly worse off in most skill sets, but certainly not by a lot. And so I could see Indonesia winning it as well. But for some reason, I don't feel like this one is going to tiebreak. I feel like it's going to be 5-3 one way or the other. But in my mind, Sweden has the edge. Dio, do you want to go next?
Yeah, one's a tough one for me. Like, I don't know who wins this. On paper, off the qualifiers, you prefer Sweden. They generally have had more success in recent years in OWC, but that said, Indonesia has had a lot of success in other country-based tournaments, so it's still possible for them to get wins here in the OS World Cup as well. You do have a larger pool this time around that I think can be good for Indonesia. If you look at the maps that they did well on in qualifiers, it was like the Nomad 1, Nomad 2, the Hidden 2, and then the DT 1. Unfortunately, there's no like corresponding DT 1 map here in round of 32 for Indonesia, and there's no high AR in the DT pool. So if that was a factor at all, then that's too bad for them, but probably just the style of map, honestly. So unfortunately, nothing super similar in this pool. but they do still have a lot of options open in the free mod pool because of how well they did on Nomad 1, Nomad 2 in qualifiers. And they've generally had success in free mod. That said, I think there's just more options for Sweden, right?
Yeah.
They have at least the hidden 1 open if they don't want to opt into a hidden 2, where Indonesia actually had a better qualifier score on the low AR hidden in qualifiers than Sweden did, which was surprising to me. They have an on-paper advantage in Hard Rock. They have an on-paper advantage in DT. So and they have an on-paper advantage on stuff like the Nomad 3, Nomad 4. Nomad 3 and Nomad 2, actually. Nomad 4 this week being more flowy and kind of similar to the Nomad 2 from qualifiers. So I think there's enough here for Sweden to just win. And I think it's going to be tough for Indonesia to find those points. I do think it's going to be like 5-3 or something like that, but probably still a Sweden win at the end of the day.
Well, surprised to see so many Sweden so far. Dada, are you gonna change it
Here
up,
it
or are we
comes.
gonna be Sweden across the board?
Okay, first of all, I had Indonesia at the start of this,
Yeah.
but now I'm gonna look to
Now you're
motivate both
committed.
teams through the power of negativity. Like, in
Alright.
my honest opinion, I think one of these teams is underseeded because of mental. The other one, I don't know what everyone sees in them, but I don't see the same thing. Like, I think Indonesia is like a really weird team every year. They have, like, in theory, such good players, and then they just underperform for like zero reason. Like, there has to be something mental. It has to be something in like their confidence, their in call. Like, someone is going emo. I don't know. Meanwhile, Sweden is like every time is like Chile pair, Dio, Chiv. They're all like, "Wow, Sweden's so good this year," and then like they lose Reedcat, which was this like really big hard rock and like mechanics player for them. They lose that. They have Skilla becoming better. They have like Andros coming back, but I still don't see the same thing people see in Sweden. Like, they're a decent team. They're like a vintage Hong Kong type of roster that they're good on early stage. They can take points against even the best of teams, but like I don't see the same hype. Like, they're okay. They're a team that I think can go to like 13th pretty easily. Maybe they can challenge for like the step right like right above like 9th to 13th, but I don't think they're better than that. I think Indonesia is in that exact same bracket, and honestly, just for pure contrarianism, I think I'm going to go Indonesia because like both of these teams, in my opinion, are kind of, I hate to say it, kind of fraudulent. Like, sorry.
Fair enough. There we go. One vote
Okay.
for the emo team. Will it be two, Shiv?
Oh, Dada said it. Both teams are
Yeah, Dada
fraudulent.
said it, not me.
But one team has Skilla, so I'm putting Sweden.
All right, I'm changing my vote to Indonesia.
That's
I'm
real.
changing my
So
vote to
basically,
Indonesia.
like,
Oh no.
just a small tidbit. I think if you look at this Indonesia roster name-wise, these guys, like, if this was 2022 or 2021, I'd be actually fully in support of Indonesia. But I don't think I've seen half of these guys play a tournament in the last year. Like, straight up, like, a lot of these guys just haven't played the game or taken it seriously at all. The only one really being, like, Lifeline, I guess. And that's a stretch because you've seen him talk about it on Twitter. Like, almost all these guys, like Vexes, Mindfrost, Vino, you rarely see them really play tournaments anymore. That new guy's pretty much retired. Dido just recently came back, but it's not comparable to, the 3WC run 2 years ago with Dido, that new guy, just completely took over that entire tournament, if you guys remember. It was not even close, but I just don't see that same power. But in Sweden, you have players like Skilla, you have new players like Trumpetino and Lightning Fox who are super good actually on the early stage stuff. You still have the old like warriors like Sphinx and Melwem, Phelan, Yagako, Andros. I think Sweden has it on early stage. I think if it was like a quarterfinals pool, I'd give it to Indonesia. But I think on the 6-star pool, Lifeline is going to have to FC every map versus Skilla or they're going to lose.
Yeah. Our predictions here on First Circle, full circle, 100% objective.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll move on to our next match. Norway versus Thailand. One that Norway are certainly the favorites, but Thailand do have some good players as well. Dada, do you want to start us off, or did you want to wait till the end to be contrarian?
I think genuinely, I don't think Thailand has too much of a chance of taking this match, but I think that this is going to be closer than people maybe expect. I think I have in my notes here, I have 5-3 to Norway. I think Thailand has some impressive depth at some kind of gimmicky maps that they can cheese out points on. And like, there's honestly, I have a bit of a concern just in Norway's kind of consistency. I think that they have pretty good consistency in DTs, but I think every single one of their other scores had a little bit of variance. And just in general, they have a couple more variant kind of players like Anthony W, Yokespy. They sometimes get like not the best accuracy. They kind of go for the combo game on even their maps that they're like good at. They have some sort of like, if they're one miss away from like getting their score slashed in half. So like in the early stage, I think Thailand can challenge for more points than maybe you would expect, but I think Norway 5-3, Norway 5-2, maybe those are pretty safe bets. Shoutouts to Deppy Force and Les Berry for Thailand, by the way, like insane players.
Yeah. Wardy?
This is tough. I mean, obviously, I'm giving this win to Norway. I guess the question for me is how many points can Thailand get? Obviously, Lesbury, I think at this stage can be a very good carry, and I do think Thailand is going to be another one of those countries that benefit more from an early stage pull compared to Norway. Interestingly enough, which is a bit surprising, Thailand has a better head-to-head on Hidden 2, which is funny just because obviously Norway has Yokespy and Thailand just had a really good Hidden 2 performance, but that's still like one of I think their only head-to-head wins, and it's still a very scary map to pick, obviously. Could just be an underperformance from Norway. You pretty much expect Yokespy to FC every single low AR map. So still tough to pick. I don't know. And I'm just thinking about the scoreline here. I don't expect Thailand to really get more than one. So I'm gonna put Norway 5-1. I think Norway just has a good combination of star players. With obviously Ninarek. Yokespy is insane at what he's good at, and I think they have enough depth and specialists that I think will be really, really good at this early stage.
Yep. Dio, you're up.
All right. Yeah. See, here's the thing. I know probably both you and Shiv are going to put Norway. So do I put Thailand? Just for the hell of it. Just for the culture.
I want to see it in your pick'ems.
I think I did. It's not going in my pick'ems. I'm going Norway.
That's the thing.
I'm going Norway. It's not going in my pick'ems.
It's not
yeah, I mean, look, I think there's winnable points for Thailand here. There's the possibility of underperformances, right? Early stage, especially for people who were just brought onto the roster for Norway, can sometimes be a little rough. But unfortunately, like all of the new players for Norway are actually returning players or literally played last year on a different team in the case of Zubs. So like none of these guys are actually new. Thailand is a team that probably should win a match in OWC this year, at least one. They have a lot of really good players and they have carry potential on particular maps like we saw in the Hidden 2. They're able to do really well and clutch up when it matters like we saw last year on, I believe it was Tiebreaker versus New Zealand in round of 16. So like they have the ability to win maps and clutch up, but unfortunately, I don't think Norway is a team where just clutching up is enough because they're just good. And the roster additions this year really helped round them out very well. So I think this is like 5-2. I don't think this is completely one-sided, but I think it's not super close either. Like kind of a middle of the way in terms of how competitive it is.
Yeah. Now, before I make my prediction, I just would like to thank 40 for letting me copy your homework because I'm going Norway 5-1 as well. We seem to be pretty in sync today. I had to put Dio between us so it didn't look too sketchy. But I mean, it's mostly been said, I feel like. The one thing I will say is I don't think Thailand are a bad team, and I give them 1 point because I think Lesbury is good enough that he can steal a point. With that said, it's a very poor stylistic matchup for Thailand. Their biggest strength by far in quals were those hidden pools. Like you said, they actually outscored Norway on the Hidden 2 in qualifiers. This week's Hidden 2 is pretty easy in terms of rating. It's just an AR8 aim map, something Norway is going to be very, very comfortable on, and I would give them the edge on it over Thailand. And so Thailand's strengths are Norway's strengths, and Norway are just better at them. So I'm going to say 5-1.
I have like two options for this match. I think it's either 5-1 or 5-2 for Norway, or I think it's 5-4 for Thailand. I think if like Thailand manages to clutch out, because in previous tournaments like 4WC where they really had generational runs, if they make it the tiebreaker, I think Let's Play is FCing. So like,
Yep.
I think that on that paper, you have players like because we've already talked so much about Let's Play and Depi Force, but players like Chess, players like Kadama, like Arigato, whose name change is Soft Funny. These guys are historic names in Thailand. Unfortunately, they don't have one of the best players, Phantasma. But besides that, I think that if they manage to get there, they can win. But it's really about getting those early points for sure. So I'm still gonna say Norway, but I really have a lot of hope that they can even go further.
Yeah. On to our next matchup. This one could be an interesting one. For the second year in a row, we've got China facing off against Japan in round of 32. This time around, it's China as the 13th seed versus the 20th. Instead of last year, it was the 16th and 17th seeds. I'll go first for this one. I'm going to give it to China, 5-2. I feel like it could be close, but it doesn't really feel like close. I think while Japan is a solid team, it's just another similar to the last matchup. It's not a good stylistic matchup for them. Both teams were pretty strong on the DTs, but again, China was slightly better on the DTs. So Japan can't really play towards those strengths too much. Of course, Lol 233 milk tea has looked great as you would expect, and is kind of that big carry that you don't really have on Japan. And I feel like Japan's second also really likes some of the more tech focused picks, as does China. And I guess the same thing, right? I feel like China are just slightly better at them. And so I do think Japan will be able to contest some of the maps, especially some of the hard rocks, some of the free mods as well. And so I would say they're going to get at least 2 points, but I think it's going to be China 5-2. I could see 5-3 as well. Dada, you want to go next?
Sure. I think that in this match, it's like the very old core of China with a couple of new players versus kind of a new generation of Japan, even though a lot of these players have kind of played in like one OWC prior, maybe not like the last one, but like the one before or the one right before. But it's a pretty interesting matchup stylistically. I still think China has the edge. I don't think Japan has necessarily like the best roster facing up against China, but I also do think that like they they can get like 3 points. I think the Chinese roster is good, but I think they're kind of like I hate to compare it because like it's the ironic comparison, but they're kind of like in that Taiwan phase where they're like at the end of their rope core wise, like this is their last dance, so to say, and like a lot of the times when that happens, it's not really like a good sign that they're not going to have very good performances. Meanwhile, Japan has made the moves. Like a lot of their like earlier core has stepped down, has done something else, or is like staffing or doing whatever. So yeah, like I think this Japan has a chance, but I don't think it's this time. Sadly, I think 5-3 China is a good score.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Shiv.
Um, I vote 5-4, but I think 5-3 is actually the right answer. I just like predicting tiebreakers. I think this Japan roster is not to be underestimated. You obviously have your big names. Best player on this roster by a large margin is Tichi. He's been the carry for Japan for a while now. But a lot of these new names, people probably aren't familiar with Stonebream. This guy's crazy on the early stage. He might be FCing every map. Sabakan, really good as well. Players like obviously Iger, players like Ryoshi, Rikumiya, really good. I think that these guys have a super high chance to take some points. But of course, when you look at this Chinese roster, it's so hard to bet against. You just see that four-man core between David, Kuremi, Milk Tea, and Crystal. Is like, how can you like say these guys are gonna lose? And then even if those four core aren't enough, you have players like Z Numbers who are super good at early stage. You have Mid C, you have Jack Wang. It's really difficult for me to say that Japan will win this match, but I have a large faith that they're gonna take a lot of points, and that's why I'm going 5-4.
40. Go for it.
I'm going like man, I want to say 5-2. I'm a bit less optimistic about this Japanese roster. Obviously this matchup happened last year. It was China versus Japan, 16 versus 17. And if you look at like and China won on tiebreaker 5-4, obviously it was a close match. If you look at who played the maps the most, it was like obviously Tichy is returning, and that's huge because Tichy was obviously massive for that match as well. But they're losing Varvalian, they're losing Rollpan, they're losing Invoker, they're losing I think Con. Those other four players like played almost everything. Like it is a complete reshuffling, almost minus Tichy, who's staying. And China, on the other hand, super like experienced, super veteran team. They're gonna have no nerves. Dada mentioned this before, like OWC nerves. Japan is gonna potentially have a lot of that with some of these players. Now, I could be surprised by the roster, and maybe the new players are really really good, and they really show up. But I think without those Japanese mainstay players, I don't know how they're gonna perform. So I'm gonna go 5-2, and I think that's optimistic for Japan, honestly.
Yeah.
5-2 to China.
All right. So I don't want to make it full China. It's should be a close match still. Yeah. I think the route to... So I'm going to talk about how I think Japan can win this match. There is the potential for them on certain Hard Rock maps, even Hard Rock Precision, there is potential there. There is actually potential on DT. Now, China did outscore Japan on both DT2 and DT3 on both of those speed maps, but there was some generational combo gaming going on those maps. Like, the Chinese players on DT2, Dwagon, formerly Jack Wang, by the way, and Milk Tea had very good AC, 97. Z Numbers and Lado Fox are at 92 and 89% on that map. Kind of similar story for DT3. Japan is like average 96, 95 accuracy. China is like average, two players are at like 94, and then Milk Tea and Dwagon have 97 again. So there is parts of the pool that Japan can take advantage of. And I think if they can hone in on those parts of the pool that are good for them, they could manage to at least take it to a tiebreaker. But even then, even if it goes to tiebreaker, I still think it's going China's way because they just have a better aim consistency roster. They just have a more well-rounded team, and they have players who have been playing together, not just in OWC, but in tons of different country tournaments or non-country tournaments. They often just register together under the same team in international tournaments all throughout the year. And so I just still think it's China here.
Yeah.
Here's how Japan can still win.
Here's how Japan can still win.
Here's how Japan wins. No, look, sometimes, it feels a little bad, especially when quite a few of us think it could be a close match to have, 5 flags all the same across the board, because it doesn't represent how close the score line may be. But that is how it goes. Just keep that in mind. And this way makes it interesting. If there's an upset, you can take a screenshot and make fun of us for not believing in Japan later. This next match, I should say, and maybe it'll only be a few maps. It's Hong Kong versus Taiwan. I expect this to be a first. Oh, are we going to? Oh, Philippines versus Malaysia. I'm getting ahead of myself.
You are just wrong, sir. You are.
Spoiler alert. I am
going ahead a
very
little
wrong.
bit.
Either way, same applies. Let's just keep it quick. Let's go left to right. Dio, you can kick us off.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going Philippines on this. I feel like there's not a ton to say here. Philippines, yeah, they lost, Henry and Hyuk, but they're still a very good team. There's still a lot of very good players on this team. Aside from the obvious of like Nathan Ram Milkteism, a lot of the newer players are also still very good, especially Seen for early stage is going to be most useful on like round of 32, round of 16 quarterfinals. And this team should still be very, very put together at the early stage. The only questions I have for Philippines are when we get past like quarterfinals, right? How well do they scale? But I don't have any questions about early stage. We saw that last year as well with an extremely similar roster for Philippines, that they had a very, very solid time in the early stages of the tournament and had very, very good team scores across a ton of different types of maps. It's a similar thing here, right? They outseeded UK, they outseeded Norway, they outseeded China. We talked about all these teams are really good early stage. So is Philippines. They are a really good early stage team, and unfortunately for Malaysia here, despite the re-addition of players like Wuhua, maybe they can get a point or two, but I think that's probably it.
Yeah, I can't say I have any doubts about them in round of 32 either. Philippines, they have their carry player in Nathan Ram that can put up those big performances. I do think they actually have a fair bit of depth this year with their supporting players. And Malaysia just don't have that carry player. They don't really have any particular skill set that feels like they could beat Philippines on. And so I'm going to have to predict a sweep.
Oh, dude, we're in sync, iFlame. I'm also going sweep.
Let's
Sweep
go,
City
Wardy.
here. Sweep City for sure. It's not just that Philippines is so good round of 32. They're a very well-rounded team in the sense that in qualies they didn't have any crazy outlier pool that they were really really good on. They're kind of just solid on everything. And when you stack that with just round of 32 depth and probably comfort at a lower star rating, I don't. There's no pick where I would put Malaysia to win in the pool. Now, still just by odds, and
No mod one.
anything could happen. Okay, no mod one, true. But, it's no mod one. Come on.
They actually outscored Philippines on no mod 1 by a good 300k in
by
qualifiers.
a good bit. That is a good point. Look, I mean, the Philippines bans no mod 1, done. It's gone. Yeah, I don't know. Malaysia probably maybe gets a point by RNG, but
Dada has words. Dada has words.
Do you want me to go before Chiv, or do you want me to?
No,
just...
you don't. No, you
Okay.
don't. Chiv's up.
I have Philippines 5-2. I think that I agree that Philippines wins this match, but I think that there's a little too much disrespect to some of these Malaysia players. I think that these players are a lot better than Wuhua is actually crazy, by the way. Especially on early stage, I don't think this guy's missing. So I think they at least have one player to match Nathan Ram. And you have Zeph, who's also a crazy early stage player. You have Lunasa, you have Rampax. These are names that have been in the tournament scene for quite a long time. So I think I'm still going 5-2. Obviously, Philippines, you have players like Impausa, who's peaking. You have Ramu, who's been always super good. You have Xylaz, a longtime anchor. You have Seen, who recently joined up. So I think Philippines still is the favorites to win, but definitely not. I would not say it's a sweep. I'd say at least 1 point, but I'm going to because I have faith.
All right, Dada. It's
I was
your
listening
time.
to both Wardy and iFlame talking, and I heard the following sentences. I don't see what map they can win. They don't have a carry player. What am I hearing?
Yeah.
They have Wuwa, they have Chiyu, they have Rampax. These guys are good. These guys are good players.
Zeph is
win.
Zeph is maybe the single best D ranker in the tournament, by the way. The single best addition for the 10k rank range edition.
These are good players, especially for early stage. These guys are crazy. Do I think they'll win against Philippines? No. But do I think they'll put up a challenge? Yes, absolutely. I think I have in my notes. I have 5-2 to Philippines. I think this is going 5-3. I think this even maybe go to tiebreaker in a Indonesia Ukraine kind of situation, or a Japan China kind of situation. This team is underrated as shit. Philippines, no flame. Obviously, you lost some of your best players. You still put up a good score in qualifiers, which is respect to you. But this Malaysia team deserves a bit of respect. Just because they didn't qualify last year because they're missing a couple key players doesn't mean they're weak. These guys can put up a fight.
Very fair. I guess.
Dada, you convinced me. I've changed on my pick'ems. I've changed from a 5-0 to a 5-1.
Incredible.
Improvement.
Little victories.
The small victories.
Dada, I Can't say the same. We'll see how it goes. 5-0.
All right. Let's
Look,
get on to the match that you
let's
were gonna get us onto earlier. iFlame,
yeah,
you jumped the gun a little bit.
attempt two. I did.
Similar
Hong Kong,
similar matchup though.
Taiwan. We'll start with Dada this time.
Listen, I have Hong Kong 5-2.
Okay.
Okay, just I think Taiwan. If there's any place where they shine, it's this round. Obviously, like they made it. They are a decent team in like quarterfinals difficulty, qualifiers difficulty. But in round of 32, I think this is where like their peak is, and I don't think their peak is better than Hong Kong's. Like Hong Kong is traditionally like one of the best teams at early rounds, and they haven't lost that edge. And they've added Misha Awa, they've brought back MCI4, they've brought back Suwagi, which was a crazy like the downside for them last year. They didn't have Suwagi. Like these are good players. These are amazing players in the early round context. So I think Hong Kong will take it. I think Taiwan can sneak one or two picks here and there, but that's basically it.
Yeah. Shiv?
I love this Taiwan roster. I think these guys are super good players. Shout out to Vuyaya, really, really strong 5K player. And obviously Willie Imokura, long-time tournament player. I have 5-3 because although I love this Taiwan roster, this Hong Kong roster is actually like it's actually beautiful. Like you have Tsuwagi and MCY4 on the same team, and you have players like Misha Awa who look so good coming into OWC. You have Stillock, you have Tommy 315. Oh my god, like it is so hard for me to say no to this Hong Kong roster, and that's why I have 5-3. But I really think that this Taiwan roster will put up a really good fight in this early stage bracket.
Yeah, they could. Wardy, what you got?
Think of the scoreline. I think this Taiwan roster should be pretty buffed by round of 32. And I think because of that, Hong Kong had a few gaps in their quals, notably like Hard Rock 2, DT3, DT2 maybe. Not to say that Taiwan necessarily always wins those in head-to-head, but I think I give Taiwan at least 1 point here. But I think not much more than a 5-1, 5-2. I think Hong Kong is just better overall, but I can imagine Taiwan getting something here.
Yep. Now, I think this one is going to be a pretty one-sided as well. I'm of course going to take Hong Kong. Now, I'll have to say 5-1. I don't want to anger Dada, so I won't say 5-0. But no, jokes aside, I do think Taiwan, like you guys have said, should be pretty strong on the early rounds, especially this pool is decent for them. Willie has been playing fantastically, so I definitely think they can get a point. Even the supporting players should be capable, at least on this early pool. But Hong Kong is just an incredibly strong team. They haven't seen these players struggle all that much on the early rounds, and I don't think this is a bad pool for them either. And so, while I do think Taiwan will get a point, I'm going to have to say 5-1.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short. I agree with most of what has been said. I'm kind of on the same train as like Dada and Chiv. There's a lot of really good early round players on the side of Taiwan, but Hong Kong is just a always really, really strong early round team. So there's not really any. Unfortunately for Taiwan, like if they were up against a team that didn't have that good early round consistency, but scaled very well, I think there's a possibility for an upset here. But unfortunately for Taiwan, that's not the case with Hong Kong. So I just don't think that possibility exists. Furthermore, I think it's like 5-1 also. Imakura obviously been around for a really long time. Riaya, Flyer. There's a couple of players here, Meowson and Summer, who get in just because of the rank range change, who have been really good in rank restricted tournaments recently. But unfortunately for Taiwan, I just don't think that's enough, because while they have players who have been really good in rank restricted tournaments recently, along with some of the old core that's still here, Hong Kong has players who have been really good in open rank tournaments recently and still good in the early stages of those tournaments. And that's just the difference between these two rosters, is the types of tournaments that they have been really solid in as of recent. And Hong Kong, more of those tournaments are at the same level of difficulty as OWC for these players, and that's just the long and short of it. I think Taiwan can get probably 1 or 2 points. I don't think it's 5-0. Because again, I still think that they're good players, but unfortunately not a win.
Yep. Last but not least, we have got one more matchup to predict. We have saved a good one for the end. Romania up against Brazil, 16 versus 17 seeds. I've randomized it this time, and Vordy, take us away. This is
Oh,
going to be a close one.
dude,
Sorry,
this
man.
is made me start on this. This
Yes.
is so hard.
Come on, Ang.
Dude, bro, they don't have Osu in the spirit world, bro. I've been trapped here for ages. I just got out. I don't have enough time to do my prep. This is tough, man. I think I've flipped this matchup on my pick'ems like 3 times already. Just depending on my mood. I think it is that that finicky. Now I think one thing when I was looking at some of their scores, I think Romania had a couple underperformances from players I kind of would just expect to do a bit better in some things. I think notably I'm thinking of like Eternum on some of the tapping maps. Because I was like, I think Brazil might have like a tapping advantage, and then that might be like their way to get ahead of maybe an extra win. Because I think a lot of these picks are like kind of coin flippy. But even if Brazil does have a tapping advantage, hypothetically, there's only like 2 tapping maps, and if Romania feels like they maybe don't feel as good on it on the day, notably the stamina, they had a really rough DTT performance in quals, they can just ban it, and then the No Mod 2, which is a speed map, is going to be a bit more equal. After that, I kind of just have to go on vibes. I think Romania has some big, heavy hitter, late stage players, but I think Brazil, I just have to give it to Brazil on experience and on depth. I think Drop in X obviously played really, really well in quals. I think some of their players that maybe wouldn't have played as well. I think Korean Maluka kind of underperformed, and I kind of expect them to do a bit better on this pool. So I give it to Brazil, but I think it's going to be super close. I think it's going to be like 5-3. If it goes to tiebreaker, I think that's maybe an advantage for some of the star players in Romania. I can imagine like Nana, Noya, Rolly turn. I'm kind of going off on that, but in my heart, I'm thinking Brazil 5-3. But any team is a fair pick here. It's very 50-50.
Yeah. One for Brazil. Are you going to make it 2, Dio?
I might. So here's the thing about Brazil's seeding is it's fraudulent. Because Korean Maluko was not playing at his house. He was playing at somebody else's house when he played qualifiers. As a result, Dropinks, also known as XX Louise XX47, played 22 of 22 maps, still averaged 540k. That was their best performer, single performer in qualifiers. Shout out to Izzy, also close to top 50 there. But Korean Maluko, for context, was number 269 out of less than 500 players. This is the guy who is, by all means, supposed to be the carry player for this roster and the best on the team. And because he is not playing at home on somebody else's setup, he's averaging 440k on qualifiers, right? And this team still made it in 17th without him. That said, qualifiers in round of 32 are 2 different beasts, right? It's a much easier pool in round of 32 than in qualifiers. But I think that benefits Brazil more. I think Brazil's roster scales less than Romania's. I think Romania's core is a little better the later this goes. If this was a matchup on a quarterfinals pool, I think I would favor Romania more, but I feel like Brazil is probably just a little bit ahead on the early stage round of 32 pool. If this goes to tiebreaker, I think Romania takes it. But I think Brazil can probably eke out a win before tiebreaker, maybe 5-3. So I'm going to give it to Brazil in the small upset just based off Korean Maluko playing at home and not at somebody else's house. And the fact that a lot of these players are very, very solid in a lot of lower star rating tournaments than Open Rank.
Well, I might know the answer, but we'll send it over to Dada.
Okay. I'm going to say 2 different arguments. One of those is what's on my pick'ems, and one of those is what's on my heart. So, on my pick'ems, I have 5-3 Romania. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. I think Romania just has a better roster overall. However, I think that Brazil was underseeded. I think that they got a lot of disrespect, especially in last week's prediction stream. I think that we just had like this whole mystery box kind of thought of like their lineup. Like we thought, oh hey, like nobody we recognize is there. It's all like the Brazilian scene, like low kind of 3 digits, higher 4 digits, and I think they proved that they can stand on their own. I think that Korean Monaco underperforming actually gave this roster a really good chance to actually showcase themselves. But here's what I'm actually gonna go with, which is Brazil. I'm gonna go with
How did I
Brazil
know?
5-3.
Who could have seen
And
this coming?
do you know why I have it on my pick'ems that Romania is winning? Because
Mm.
if Brazil loses, I'm not as upset. It's hedge. I'm hedging. But if Brazil wins, I'm happy, and I say fuck my
Dude.
pick'ems.
This
Who
man
cares?
is hedging in the water right now. Oh my
Right?
god.
So what actually has me worried about Romania, and let me just argue this a little bit so that we can rationalize it for later weeks. Badu is no longer there. Badu was one of the main names that struck fear into people when they were actually strategizing against Romania. So this all of a sudden becomes like a team you'd ban mechanics.
Mhm.
Like you would ban mechanics against this Romania roster. You'd no longer ban any type of gimmick, any type of like reading, because Badu is no longer there. Badu not being there actually makes this roster so much easier to strategize against, because you have roughly the same kind of players. You have mechanics players, you have stream players, you have the more kind of aimy players and like speed players. You don't no longer have that edge of like having that guaranteed FC on a couple of the weirder maps in the pool. These are much more easily cheesable. And if you can have a roster that cheeses these maps out, even if they strategize, like not necessarily prioritizing them, but just picking into them later on, like this is a much easier Romania roster to actually crack and to actually beat. So I think Badu missing there is just a really important thing that will come into account into every single matchup Romania plays, and it really weakens their roster in my opinion. So I'm going Brazil 5-3. I agree absolutely. If it goes to tiebreaker, Romania is winning this. I'm not even giving like Brazil a chance if it goes to tiebreaker.
Mechanics tiebreaker.
Yeah, just if it doesn't get to tiebreaker, I think Brazil can win this, and I think Brazil will win this.
All right,
Where
Kevin.
did Iceland go?
I don't know where Iceland went. Kevin, it's your
You
turn.
just yeah. You can
Bro,
go.
dipped. We'll autofill him later.
Go
I
Chief.
have Romania winning 5-4. I think this match is going to be super close, but I
Mm.
think I'm expecting it to go to tiebreaker, and I'm expecting the mechanics tiebreaker to play a part. Reasoning, I think a lot of these Romania players are super strong early stage. If you pay attention, I think that after the qualifiers results, they did underperform, but I have a large expectation for players like Origin, large expectation for players like Kahist, Eternum obviously, Nanoya especially. He's the Badu like substitute this year, right? You have to put in somebody else that can at least be on the same level in some regard. So Nanoya's got big shoes to fill. But I think on paper, if they can make it the tiebreaker, which I'm confident in because there's enough mechanics maps in the pool, I think Romania takes this one pretty wholeheartedly on the tiebreaker. That being said, I've been hyping up a lot of these Brazil players for a long time. Just like people have said, Luiz is super good. Kaguya is really good as well. Main has dominated 4-digit tournaments for a while. And Korea on the actual setup is going to be a force to be reckoned with. So I think it's going to be the closest match in the tournament besides, I guess, Sweden versus Indonesia. But even then, I think this one's going to be very highly contested.
Yeah, I think this one is going to be one of the closest matchups of the weekend. On one hand, Romania have their core that have done so strong in previous years in Lacrise, Eternum, Nanoya. But of course, Brazil, you have Corea and Maluco not being able to play quals from the usual setup is the big carry and was super consistent last year, getting, I think, consistently top 30 individual performances in the earlier rounds and even better in the later rounds. Players like Izzy and Dropanex really showed up for quals as well. And so Brazil has a lot going for them. With that said, I'm going to have to take Romania as well. And I was deciding between 5-3 and 5-4, but ultimately, I think it's what it's going to come down to is the tiebreaker. I do feel like the tiebreaker favors Romania, as do the rest. I just don't know that I share the same confidence that Brazil can take the win before they get to the tiebreaker. And at that point, I think most people would agree Romania should be slightly favored on the tiebreaker, although even that is no guarantee. Brazil could put up a good score on that. And even if it goes to tiebreaker, I could see Brazil winning. It's also interesting. This is maybe not the best pool for Romania. I feel like against Brazil specifically, Romania should have a bit of an edge on tapping with players like again, Lucrez, Eternum that are so good at that skill set. But there isn't so much tapping. I mean, the speed in this pool is not crazy. I think there are a couple tapping maps, but they tend to be a bit streamier. I mean, you've got one stamina map, but it's nothing crazy that's going to catch out Brazil. And so I think that will make it harder for them, but I have faith. I think they're going to pull through, make it a tiebreaker, and take the victory. Any last thoughts before we close this one off?
Banger
If
weekend.
Brazil wins this on tiebreaker, we are all wrong.
We are all wrong. Yep.
Actually, all 5 of us, yeah.
Yeah, actually,
Dude.
all of
All of
us
us,
would be wrong.
We've all
Yeah.
predicted
Tiebreaker.
Romania to
God.
win tiebreaker.
Yeah, even the
Look.
people predicting in Brazil are like, yeah, Romania wins the tiebreaker.
Yeah,
So-
look. Clip it, and you can send it to us when Brazil inevitably wins tiebreaker. But that's going to be
God.
it for us. We've got a ton of exciting matchups this weekend. Those are going to start 13 UTC Saturday between Hong Kong and Taiwan. So stay tuned for that tomorrow. Once again, huge shout out to Dio, who has been on the grind the last 2 days to get the graphics done in time for this episode. And thanks to Vorti Shiv Dada as well for coming on. Last but not least, thank you guys to all of you for watching who make the podcast interesting. We hope to see you all tomorrow for the first day of OSU World Cup elimination stage. Take care and see you guys next week.